Welcome to the Concrete Rainbow, the podcast? That's right, it's not just a rambling, middling blog anymore, because this week we've got an amazing guest, our first ever, in fact. We're not paying her to appear here, but she is here. Abby DePlacido, lifelong friend. Welcome to the Concrete Rainbow.
I'm a friend of the pod.
You're a friend of the pod, long-time listener, first-time podder. So, Abby, you were nice enough to come on here and talk to me about sort of your background in teaching and technology. And can you give me a little bit of a brief background? What's your overall teaching history here?
I am a certified teacher in Pennsylvania, grades 7 through 12 for English, grades 4 through 8, and a reading specialist for grades pre-K through 12. I have taught everything from kindergarten all the way up through college. Mostly English, a little bit of history here and there, and
so over the years, have you seen like technology in your own practice like kind of grow in your classrooms, or how's that kind of affected you over time?
Definitely. I think that, I've been in the field for about 10 years-ish, and how much it's changed from when I first started teaching to where we are now, it's something that's constantly changing and evolving, and it's something that I think teachers have to keep up with.
So along those lines then, like with social media, like I remember when we started using Facebook, it was just for college students. It was very different than it is now. Like, how do you use social media, and kind of how do you see it being used like in the classroom, I guess?
So one way that I have used social media is through Twitter, and I mostly used Twitter when I was an elementary reading specialist because the district I was working in was making a really big push to use that kind of technology in the classroom, outside of the classroom, as a way to kind of connect teachers and students and parents. And so they had like a district-wide hashtag that people would follow. And so I would just post things that I was doing in my classroom with my students, what we were doing on a day-to-day basis. If students created some kind of work, I would post that, post pictures, and then also things like information and resources for parents. So I think a lot of people probably incorrectly assume that social media doesn't have a place in the classroom. I think that it does, and to kind of pretend that, or ignore the role that social media plays in our lives and in our teaching, I don't think you can do that, because whether you like it or not, social media is part of how we interact with the world around us, and it's a way that keeps, students engaged. It bridges that divide sometimes between like school and home. It's something that I think teachers should be willing to embrace and not run away from.
Well, and did you see like were parents and students, like, have they like sort of accepted social media more in the classroom, like with Twitter, for example? Like, did they reach out to you as well through that, or was it more of a kind of a not a one sided, but was it more coming just from your side there, I guess?
A little of column A, a little of column B. I think that working with smaller kids, it's harder to say. I think with seeing how like Twitter in the classroom works with older students, that's a way where, a teacher can maybe, field questions from students if they're like struggling with a homework assignment, or if a teacher posts a reminder, they can interact with students that way. And so it's really kind of like expanding the dialogue between teachers and students. And you can use it, not only just to, communicate what's going on in the classroom, but you can also use it to kind of supplement the content of what you're teaching. So you might be able to, for homework or something, if, all students have access to technology, which is something that we're seeing more and more and more, you can post like a discussion topic on Twitter, and students can, reply that way. And, parents can see that, students can see that, and it leaves like a nice trail of evidence that, you can kind of refer back to.
Well, so besides Twitter, what other tools have you used throughout your history? And I guess what was your, favorite or most effective?
Let's see. I have used a website called Edmodo, and that is really similar. It looks very similar to Facebook, and that's a way where students can post assignments that they've turned in. I can post homework. I can post things that, like assignments that I've given in class. So if students are absent, they can, go onto Edmodo and download the assignment. If I remember correctly, there's like a grade part where they can see their grades, but I'm not entirely sure that still exists. I've also used Class Dojo, which is like a behavior tracking app, and that's really good for younger students because it can send like a behavior report to parents, and parents can kind of see where their student is doing behavior-wise, and that lets the teacher kind of customize all the different types of behaviors that they're looking for in the classroom. So that's a nice like positive behavior support that teachers can use, me speak English real good.
We're not paying these guest folks. They are just volunteers.
Me teacher. What else? There's also apps and programs like Kahoot, which is a review.
Kind of like a quiz.
Yes. It's like a quiz app that...
From what I understand, too, you're able to, both teachers and students can kind of put together different online quizzes and all that.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yes. And so that also, not to get too technical, but allows students to kind of get some responsibility in their own learning where they're creating the content for the review. And so that also, bridges connections in their brain. And, invest them a little more in their learning because they know that the questions they're creating are entirely possibly going to end up on, a quiz or a test.
Exactly.
There's also a ton of apps that I've used as a reading specialist, and most of them are free, which is even better. So there's one that I really like. It's Reading A to Z. I believe that's what it's called, and if it's not, I'll tell you it's not that.
They're not a sponsor this week, so you're good. Whatever they're called.
I don't want to be like, here's all the apps I use, and you type it into like the App Store and it's like, this does not exist. Or the app looks like the Skype interface.
Listen, Abby's thought about teaching for many years. That's almost like experience.
I've thought about teaching for many years. I've think about a lot of things.
Well, I want to ask you too, because like when we were in high school, we didn't have all of these different kinds of technologies. In fact, I remember in college was the first time that I had like a remote control in class, and we were able to participate in like a clicker. Yes, right. So that was the first time I was ever like in a Kahoot-esque kind of scenario there. What do you think it would have been like for us, like growing up, if we would have been able to have technology as more of a teaching tool for us?
I mean, I think for myself, I probably would have been more engaged in the classroom because, it's taking something that's already part of our lives, and, putting an educational spin on that. So if we were able to, have like a classroom blog, I know that a lot of teachers do something like that where students like contribute to like a blog or a forum, and I think you can do something like that through Google Classroom. Like Google has Google Classroom, which is a whole set of programs, apps, whatever you want to call it, to use specifically in the classroom. A lot of schools are adopting Chromebooks, and every student gets a Chromebook and what they call a one-to-one classroom. And so that makes it really easy, really convenient for students to use. So I feel like if I was in, say 10th grade in 2018 and I was able to kind of contribute to class discussions through like typing a blog, I feel like I would have been all about that because I, as you know, had the Open Diary, which was kind of like the Twitter of the early 2000s, if you will. And I was probably kind of a difficult student in that I was hard to engage. I was very bored easily. And I think, just trying, if teachers had been willing to try something new or different, I think that would have probably reached a lot more students who were, for better or for worse, in the similar boat as I was in terms of engagement.
Exactly. I can't remember too many times where I was surprised by a lesson plan that a teacher had or how they approached the information.
And even, if technology in the classroom existed then, I certainly never saw it. It was all very much, internet was not really used in the classroom. Any sort of research we did was pretty much through, books.
I want to say, too, with all of your years of teaching and have used Web 2.0 stuff, social media, what would you basically recommend to people who, new teachers coming into the field or anything like that?
A couple things. First, don't be afraid to use technology in the classroom. Again, whether we like it or not, that's part of our everyday life now, and I think it's going to make your life a lot easier if you embrace it rather than try and shun it. And another thing I would suggest is to start small. You don't need to have a Twitter, a Facebook, an Instagram, an Edmodo, and a Class Dojo. Pick one or two things. And, trial and error is a big part of teaching, and it might take a while for you to figure out what works best for you and your students. I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt where something that I've been really excited about has failed miserably in the classroom, and that's okay. So don't be afraid to use it, but also don't overwhelm yourself. Don't make your life any harder than it has to be. So see what others are doing out there. I mean, Pinterest is a beautiful resource for stuff like that. Instagram, teachers on Instagram have tons and tons and tons of cool resources, and you can see what they're doing in the classroom. YouTubers, there's a wealth of information at your fingertips. If you have an idea, somebody has probably done something similar to it. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Don't be afraid to use what other teachers have done and make it your own.
Well, Abby, thank you so much for serving as Episode 1's guest expert. Join us for the second episode of The Concrete Rainbow next week, where we interview Paul Hogan of the Crocodile Dundee series of films. I'm being told that we could not get Paul Hogan, because this is actually not a real podcast, and was only recorded for a class assignment. For everyone still listening, thank you so much, and sayonara.